Gentlemen, welcome to the Be the Man podcast. I have, for a long time, as long as I can remember, been fascinated by the human body. In fact, I wanted to be a physician and actually an orthopedic surgeon, and I was pursuing that in university level, and then had a special experience with a mentor and realized my calling in life was to teach and to lead and to speak and to mentor and coach. And so I shifted that path, but I've always been fascinated with the body. And so then I went and got my EMT and volunteered in that and did wilderness first aid. And in fact, I just went through some training recently, just signed up for some more training. I just love the human body, and I love geeking out about how it operates from head to toe and inside and out, how the workings of the brain and the body and how we can optimize it and use this vehicle, right? Everything you and I experience in life is through the vehicle of our body. And if we can get the body in its optimized condition, and it can do incredible things, the body is just a miracle. And I feel like we should wake up every day just in awe and wonder that it's functioning, even when it's sore and doesn't work quite right and has its quirks and problems, right? Still fascinated by the way it changes and regenerates and grows and heals and does all these things. Today, our guest is a master of movement in the body. This guy is one of the best in the world, and especially in our country, for movement and assessing movement and biomechanics and how movement in the body is affecting the body and, as we talk about in the show, every other part of life. And so he's going to talk through his expertise, his experience, what he has learned about the body, and how he helps men and women, but predominantly men. And in this show, we talk about how men can get our bodies optimized and watching and learning from our movement. We talk about specific and simple exercises that will get your body in a better condition, help you do better work, and actually prevent injuries. We talk about workouts, from simple workouts to really super advanced workouts, and little strategies there to maximize, especially as we're getting older, and how we can keep up strength and vigor and just feel awake, energized, and alive all the time, and use our body as it was intended to be used, and notice when it gets off and what we can do about that. We also take this unique little turn into the spiritual guidance and providence and serendipity in building business and succeeding in life. And our guest is just a fantastic human being and a great guy. We have a really great episode. So be sure, gentlemen, to subscribe to the podcast. Go ahead and get the Be the Man app. It's available on iOS and Android. If you like the episode today, leave a review, share it with friends, family, colleagues, mark it so you can come back to it. Take notes if you can, if you're in a place where you can take some notes and jot down a couple of things. I was taking notes during the show because he shares a few things with his vast experience and expertise, things that I started working on yesterday with my kids. I was like, hey, this is what I learned, this is what we're doing. We started doing it in our workouts. And I hope you will take this stuff, do something with it, share it, and become better stewards of your body. Enjoy this show. All right, I geek out. I'm kind of a nerd around the body, and I love learning how the body works. And a couple weeks ago, I got to meet Trent Nessler here, and actually we were doing just a little bit of martial arts stuff.
Yeah.
And he starts using my body and doing the biomechanics. I'm like, yes, this stuff's amazing. And so I had to have you on the show here. So welcome, Trent. Glad to have you, and we're excited to learn from you, brother.
Well, and I'm super excited to be here. As I said, this is stuff I'm super passionate about, and I love to talk about it. So love to share it with your audience.
This is awesome. So why don't you give us a quick background and what you do and why it's so important?
Yeah. So background, I'm a physical therapist. I got my master's in physical therapy, was practicing for about 3 years, and was treating a lot of kids with ACL injuries. This is back in the late 90s, and decided to go back and do a doctorate with a focus in biomechanics and motor learning to really try to understand better how I could evaluate athletes to determine injury risk. And so, my journey really started over 20 years ago. fast forward.
Would it be rude of me to jump in right there? Because
No.
right out the gates, brother, you got a master's and then you're like, I'm going back for a doctorate in biomechanics. Like what drove you, instead of just be like, well, I'm just going to do this and do an okay job. What drove you to this level of excellence? Like, what was it that took you right out the gates to a totally different level?
Well, I think part of it goes back to my father. My father is he was an entrepreneur. He started a very small company with he and my mom out of our basement in our house. And now he is I want to say they were rated the largest masonry company in the U.S. With over 2,000 employees. They cover multiple states. And my dad does all of this from a wheelchair. After fracturing his neck in 1979, he still ran a construction company, and he has suffered a second spinal cord injury, C1, C2 spinal cord injury, became a complete quad, and still ran his company. So, he taught me at a pretty young age that, limitation is not limitation, it's your limitation. And so, what spawned it to me was, I was seeing a lot of kids with ACL injuries, and I just was not satisfied with what I was doing with them clinically. I was seeing movement patterns that they had that I knew intuitively was wrong, and I wasn't able to correct it with the current knowledge that I had. And so I knew I needed to be better informed. So that really started my I call it a lifelong journey plan. Yeah. And that's, I dig into the research literally once a month. I'll pull, 5 or 6 journal articles and read through them and really try to see, like, how is this going to influence me clinically, and some of the things that I do.
You're still staying on top of it. You didn't last graduation and say, okay, I have a doctorate now, I'm good. You're on top of it it sounds like a strategic monthly plan.
Yeah.
Make sure you're at the top of your game.
I actually have it on my schedule once a month to pull journal articles. Because it's development. Because it's to me it's absolutely essential. And two, it's where I'm at today is we're involved in multiple research projects, not just in the US, but international research projects. And it all comes from that constant desire to do things better. Yeah. I'm a physical therapist, and I'm appalled at, the lack of ingenuity or desire to do things better in the profession. And so I'm constantly pushing our profession. I mean, the reason that we developed the technology that we developed, quite honestly, it would not need to be there if everybody did that. If everybody sought to excel themselves, got better at what we do, but we don't as a profession. And so it actually left an avenue for our technology to jump in play. And, it's been quite honestly, it's been amazing. I'm so excited because we just launched a new version of our technology 2 Fridays ago. And I've literally been on a conference call every night since I've been traveling, just with different research partners from around the world, wanting to use the database that we have created to do some pretty amazing research.
Amazing. Congratulations, brother.
Yeah.
Well, I cut you off in your story. So, and now I'm sure the listeners are like, wait a minute, what research and what are you doing? Who are you working with? So keep going with your story. You got your doctorate.
Yeah.
And like, what do you do now? And why does it matter so much?
Yeah. So I felt, I came from a strength and conditioning background. I was a weightlifter, I did bodybuilding. I was convinced that if I could find a better way to assess these athletes, that I could create better programming to prevent them from having a re-injury rate. ACL injuries, the majority of them are what are called non-contact and orientation, which means that we can prevent them. So a mass majority of ACL injuries are preventable. And so
pause there for a second. I'm gonna jump in here in this dialogue.
Yeah.
Would you say that's pretty true for a lot of injuries in the body?
So it's interesting enough. Yeah. So most musculoskeletal injuries are preventable, about 80%. Matter of fact, for the military, that equates to a $1 trillion expense for preventable musculoskeletal injuries. It's ridiculous. And that goes across the spectrum, quite honestly, whether it's in athletics. I work with first responders now, whether it's first responders, military personnel, et cetera. The majority of the injuries that we suffer truly are preventable. When I say preventable, it's hard to prevent something that's never really happened. So what I say now is, from a science standpoint, is mitigate your risk for the potential for the injury. And so, what I found is after going through all of my education and, I started filming a lot of athletes. So this is back in the late 90s. I'm filming people with big cameras and beta tapes and filming how they move. And I was trying to come up with an assessment. And in 2000, probably around 2005-ish, I came across a slow motion video technology that allowed me to really kind of accelerate what I was learning. From there, I actually went to Microsoft and we were programming the Xbox basically to try to automate what I was doing with my eyeballs. And I was teaching other PTs to do. We were trying to automate it through technology. Wow. Unfortunately, that technology it's gaming technology, so it's not accurate enough. And so I came across a wearable sensor technology out of Australia that was moving into the US, partnered with them, and we created this, what is called the Athletic Movement Index, and launched it in 2017. And since then, it's been used in 450 different facilities. It's used in the NBA and the NFL, and it's been used to assess over 60,000 athletes.
Incredible.
Which is equated to over 6 million data points related to human movement. And so what it's allowing us to see is like things that we have mass data now, which is actually preceding research, because we're able to look in the data and see what trends there are. And what was important for me is that I can see where these trends are and then create better programming to actually mitigate those trends, if that makes sense.
Absolutely does. And you're gathering your own data, and you have so much of it, then you can, I love what you're saying, you stay ahead of the curve and then go into preventative measures.
Yeah. So to just give you an example, at how it's preceding research. So there was, and I don't want to bore your listeners, but there was some recent research that showed that if you have a concussion, you're 3 times more likely to tear your ACL if you're an athlete. 3 times. So, and that's up to 3 years post-concussion. So the question that I always had is, well, why is that? So this research was published in 2018. I'm like, well, why is that? So one of the things that we actually track with our technology is your history of concussion. And then we also look at all of your biomechanical factors. So how your limb responds during certain movements, during certain tasks, right? So one of the things that we found was that those athletes that are concussed, they're not able to, when they do a single leg squat, they're not able to prevent their knee from moving in and out. And more importantly, when their knee moves into what we call a dynamic valgus position, which is really bad for your ACL, really bad for your meniscus, really bad for your MCL, that when they would fall into this dynamic valgus, they would do it at a very high rate of speed, a higher rate of speed than a non-concussed athlete. So what that did then is now our concussion protocols are not only are you going to get this vestibular stuff for your head, but you're also going to get single limb training, which we've never done before. So that's how like the data is preceding the research, and more importantly, impacting what we do clinically to help to mitigate risk for musculoskeletal injury.
Oh my goodness. So, okay, my mind starts racing immediately. There, you found a direct connection between the brain and biomechanics in the knees, and how that's happening. And you may not know the answer to this question, but the first thing that pops in my mind is like, what other things are happening at a brain level that might be similar to a concussion? Anything from sleep deprivation to food to whatever else that is now showing up in a biomechanical way Man, this is fascinating.
Right. Well, and two, obviously sleep deprivation is very important for our military personnel as well as our first responders. And, we know that there are consequences to not sleeping well. I would suspect, based on what I know currently, that there is an association with lack of sleep and biomechanical risk.
Yes.
I mean, it just makes sense because you're tired, you're
Exactly.
fatigued, you're not going to move as well. And so, to me, that's where part of the reason that we created the database the way that we did is I want to be able to leverage various technologies that track other things like sleep deprivation to movement so that we can see what those trends are. I'll give you a perfect example. We have a research study that we're talking about launching abroad. There's a technology out there that's basically a pair of goggles that you put on your head, and it tracks your eyeballs. And it goes through a series of tests where you have to visually track these things. And based on this 5-minute assessment, it can tell you what grade of concussion you have based on your visual response to these goggles.
Incredible.
And so one of the things that we're doing is we're actually combining the goggles with the movement assessment to see, at what point, at what grade of concussion do you start to see biomechanical factors influenced, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Because then
amazing.
that's I mean, you think about, the impact to not just athletics, but think about the impact to military personnel, think about the impact to firefighters and police officers, to all those other populations that are dealing with concussion and musculoskeletal risk.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And start all the correlation and causation and fitting it all together in these intricate pieces. It's
Right.
going to answer so many things and prevent so many problems.
Well, and that's the thing that's the most important to me, because one of the things that used to frustrate me as a clinician is, there'd be all these amazing technologies and they come out with all this massive data. And I'm like, so what does this data mean? Like so what I always tell people who engage with our technology, it's meaningful clinical information.
Yeah.
So it's going to give you information that is going to clinically drive what you do and how you interact with that person, because every ACL is not the same. Some people, they move differently. Sometimes maybe it's a glute medius problem. Sometimes maybe it's a foot problem. Sometimes it's a core and a hip problem. So what it allows us to do is dial in better with what types of programming is actually going to make the biggest impact.
So cool. And what you just explained right there, I think is going to be one of the most needed things moving into this life we're living now, where data points, we already have access to trillions of data points, and it's just going to keep increasing. So having something like you're talking about, like, well, wait a minute, what do I do with all this information? How do I make it relevant and useful in my life? And we're going to need stuff like that so much.
Well, and so, and again, I'm just one of those that, I have a pie in the sky kind of vision. Yeah. My vision is right now is the version that we just released is amazing. And what it allows us to do is scale our assessments to a higher level. Like I was sharing with you before we got on this, that I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, and we're assessing 2,000 firefighters. And that takes us a fair chunk of time to do that. And I have 5 people that are here with me to do it. The new version is going to allow us to, expedite that process slightly. But the idea is, by what we've moved to with the new version, is eventually this assessment will be a self-driven assessment, meaning that you could come into the gym, and as a trainer, I could hook you up with the sensors. The assessment's going to take you through it, and it's going to spit out an exercise program for you to do based on you and how you move. Yeah. And knowing all of the biomechanical risk factors for injuries and helping you mitigate your risk for injury.
Man, where do I sign up, brother?
Yeah.
That is exactly what we need. We're individualized, customized training programs for me.
Right. And
right?
based on how you move, not some, failed interpretation of your strength
Yeah.
or your, because at the end of the day, I can test your rotator cuff strength, I can test your bicep strength and all that, but it doesn't tell me how you function. Like it doesn't tell me how your shoulders functioning. Just because I test your quads and your hamstrings or your glutes, it doesn't tell me how you function when you're on one leg.
Yeah.
Like this is, the beauty of biomechanics is biomechanics. So if I improve the way that you move, I'm going to mitigate your risk for injury. And oh, by the way, I'm also going to increase your vertical jump. I'm going to increase your sprint speed. I'm going to increase your power output. So the beauty of it
And when
is,
I met you, the way we were doing
yeah,
self-defense,
yeah,
I mean, you
yeah,
improve a couple little moves there,
yeah,
and I was like, "What? Just that
yeah.
tiny
It's
little
like I was
technique of
telling you, it's just all
biomechanics?"
about it's all about biomechanics, and it's
Exactly.
simple little things like that that make huge changes in how you can manipulate somebody's body like we were doing for the martial arts, or how you can manipulate somebody's body to improve the efficiency of their movement. So I give you a perfect example, like with our firefighters. One of the things that we're vetting out right now is I'm convinced that if I can make you, if you're a firefighter, if I can make you move better, okay, you become more efficient.
Absolutely.
Makes sense, right? If you become more efficient, you burn less energy. Makes sense. If you burn less energy, guess what? You also burn less of oxygen.
Yeah.
So when you put on your SCBA and you got your oxygen on, you're going to last longer in a fire now because you're moving more efficiently, burning less energy, so you can stay in the fire longer.
Yeah.
So, and that is huge for firefighters because it's about their oxygen consumption. If you can improve their efficiency and allow them to stay in a fire longer based on their how much air they take out of their tank, that's huge.
Yes. Well, so one of the things I love, and I talk about all the time, I geek out about is what I call holistic optimization. So you're trying to
Yes.
optimize every part of your life. And what I'm hearing you saying here is the same thing. You're just optimizing movement and
Yeah.
biomechanics
Hmm.
for energy levels, I would say,
Yeah.
for stamina, for
Yep.
staying in a fight longer, whether it's
Yep.
for your life to protect your family or in martial
Right.
arts, it's staying in a sport longer. It's
Right.
staying in the game. It's performing at a higher level, which gives you a competitive advantage and I guess we could argue this in almost every aspect of life. If you can optimize your biomechanics, you've just had this ripple effect through
Yeah.
life.
Well, and the thing is too, is especially for those that are athletic or that they're in an athletic type of population. So we call our first responders and our military personnel the tactical athlete, right? Because a lot of what they do is so physical, and if you're looking, if you're a fighter and you're looking to optimize your power to do a single leg takedown, if your biomechanics are improved, your speed of takedown and your accuracy of takedown is going to be huge. If you're a firefighter and your biomechanics are correct, when you go running up a flight of stairs, you're going to burn less energy, which means your oxygen consumption is going to be better.
Yeah.
If you're a special operator, then if you're able to run across the field, by the time you get there and you're running more efficiently, by the time you get there, you're going to be less gassed
Yeah.
and able to carry on more of a fight. So it's, I mean, I can geek out about biomechanics and it's the end all be all to life, but it's really not. That being said, how a human moves is so important, and it's always amazed me because when I was in PT school, we were termed the movement profession. But yet I've taught hundreds and hundreds, thousands of PTs across the country how to assess human movement, I'm still surprised at how many don't even know the basics of how to really evaluate how somebody is moving. And hence that's why I created the system that we did to help alleviate that, number one. And two is by creating a standard of the way that we do it, what it's going to allow me to do is not collect. So you know how long it takes a biomechanics lab to collect data on 1,000 people? It's probably 5 years. Okay. Do you know how many movement assessments data I collect on a monthly basis? Over 2,000.
Wow.
with the release of this new system, and because we're launching in the UK and Australia, in my goal is to collect data on 100,000 people, because then you can break it out and you can see normative values for how should a 16-year-old female soccer player move versus a 16-year-old lineman versus a 16-year-old running back, because what puts one at risk versus another at risk is very different, and how one should move efficiently versus another efficiently is very different. My goal is eventually to get to the point where we can get these normative values so that you can take your 16-year-old daughter in who's playing soccer, have an assessment, and know where she sits according to normative values. And if she's outside of those normative values, where her risk lies, so that we can better train her.
Well, that's what I was saying. And
Yeah.
then put in a training program that's relevant and real and applicable. I love that.
Absolutely.
And I have to back up to an idea that you just shared, because it just struck me so forcefully. Like, it's about movement. I love this idea that our body is a vehicle for life. So in a way, everything that we're experiencing in life is experienced through the body. And it's almost always through some kind of movement.
Yep.
And so you're right, because the biomechanics of movement is life. And it's
well, you know what, and it's
everything you do.
Yeah, and quite honestly, it affects everything about you. I was just talking to one of our firefighters who suffered a stroke not too long ago. He's a young guy, he's 52 years old, suffered a stroke not too long ago, and he's been relatively inactive since then. And with that, there's a lot of changes that occur. He does not have any muscular effects or, slur or anything like that. He's still being a firefighter, right? So he's still very functional. But part of the problem is that his motivation is down, et cetera. And he's feeling that, right? So and his sleep is completely jacked up. Like, he's sleeping now 2 hours a night. Like, you can't function on that. So a big part of what we talked about is like trying to get your body back to homeostasis. And how do you return your body back to homeostasis? Number one, we got to exercise it. Like, at the end of the day, I know you don't want to do it, but you got to do it, because at the end of the day, exercise helps your brain heal. Exactly. We know this from the concussion research. We know that if you have a concussion and you do exercise to a point where it does not elicit your concussion symptoms, your brain heals from that. And I would say it's got to be the same with strokes. That if you can start to get the person moving and get those chemicals flowing, those positive chemicals flowing through your body again, and those positive neurons making connections, and the dopamine release that goes along with that. I mean, to me, I firmly believe that, the more stagnant you are, the more depressed you're going to be, and the more things just start to fall apart.
Yep. Brother, I don't think we can emphasize enough what you're just saying right there. The connection to moving your body in a healthy, vigorous way, consistently and regularly, and how healthy that is for the brain, for the mind, for the emotions, for the spirit, for the soul, everything. Man, I don't know. I could shout that from the rooftops and not stop, because we've got to move our bodies.
Greg, I'll tell you, and this is kind of off topic, not kind of off topic, but, from our work together at the previously, it's a very religious type of organization, and faith is a big part of that. And I'm a firm believer in faith. And, it's, I always tell people that what I was able to do with the technology and, what I was able to create is totally a God thing. Because, I'll tell you, I reached out to this Australian company off of their website. Their salesperson calls me. I talk to her. I tell her what I want to do. Like, I'm some Joe Blow PT. I'm telling her what I want to do. She says, "Oh, that sounds great. I'll have the CEO call you." Like, yeah, that's a beautiful blow off. Never had that one before. And lo and behold, what happens? The CEO calls me. Wow. I have a conversation with him. He flies from Australia to Colorado, where I was teaching, sat down with me for a 4-hour dinner, and we wrote out on a napkin what we were going to do.
No.
And I'm a firm believer that God will open those doors for you. What we've created is way beyond my intellectual capabilities. I'm a firm believer. I was how the AMI came about is I was writing a textbook on movement and how to discern, like, what this leads to as far as injuries and all that. As I was writing out the book, it's like, wow, like this movement leads to that movement, which leads to this, which leads to that, which leads me to this cause. And this is what I do. So I started writing out this big, huge, long Excel spreadsheet with all these different tabs. And that became the formula for the assessment. And I tell people all the time, it's like, I don't know. I don't know. It's just like, it's like God was, I'm a firm believer. God was speaking through me and giving me the knowledge to be able to bring that to fruition. And I am, like I had a call on Friday. I had some mathematician, PhD mathematician from Colorado State call me who wants to partner because we now have the largest movement database right now in the world. And so she wants to partner to create some normative values for our first responders, which is amazing for me. But then the next thing she tells me is that she works for a research firm that does all this research for the military, and they are looking for this exact same type of approach. And I was like, so then she's presenting our technology to some pretty high level people in the military about what we're doing. That is a total God thing. I mean, it's just
so awesome.
I'm constantly amazed at, because there's many a times where I feel like I as an individual am not worthy of his grace, and he has constantly been opening doors for me, like the stuff that we did with you all.
Exactly.
I don't know if you ever heard how that came about.
No.
Is one of the individuals, I was training in the gym and I was working a heavy bag, and one of the individuals came to me and said, hey, do you teach martial arts? And I said, I train martial arts. I can teach, for the right individuals. We had a conversation. I brought my professor into it, and lo and behold, what we were doing with you all.
Connection. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I have long believed, Trent, that as we're chasing greatness, excellence, contribution, that God conspires in our favor.
Yeah.
And he opens doorways and does incredible things as we are seeking to move forward in just goodness.
Yeah.
In offering something better to the people around us in the world in general.
And it's interesting because I have 5 doctoral level PT students with me who are doing these assessments with me. And, I tell them all the time, that, this is a grind. You have to also, that when those opportunities come available, you have to be willing to put in the work and the effort that's needed.
Exactly.
And it's not easy. I get up at 3 a.m. I work out, I go train jujitsu, and then I'm down assessing firefighters at 7 o'clock, and I don't finish up until 5 p.m. And we're grinding all the way through. We saw 100 firefighters today. But it's, and we're on week 3 right now of 4 weeks. So it's a grind, but you got to be willing to, when those opportunities come available, they're not always there, right? You got to be willing to be able to do, you have to be willing to do what it takes to make it happen.
Yes. When they show up, there's no guarantees, man. When
Yep.
they show up, take advantage of them, put in the work.
Absolutely.
I love that. So, okay. So my mind, I'm sure the listeners doing this, but my mind's okay. So what can I do? Like, I'm listening to you and thinking, well, where do I go sign up for to get that full assessment for myself? But in your experience with all these people and in functional fitness, where does the average guy who wants to be an athlete, wants to be active, wants to stay healthy, what do I do? Where do I begin? What are some of the biggest takeaways that you've seen that's like, man, these are the things that just work?
Yeah, interesting. So number 1 is core. Most people don't know that if you improve your performance on plank, side plank, right and left alone, you decrease your risk for injury by 3-fold. And so, having good core stability is really important. Planks and side planks specifically have been noted in the research, and that's why they're a part of our movement assessment.
Is it honestly that simple to do? Are you talking about a plank on your elbows or on your hands or both?
Yeah. Yes. It's that simple.
And just holding a plank in the center and then on the side.
And on the side.
And just hold it daily?
Daily, but then also progressing it up. It's progressive resistance exercise. Eventually a plank is going to be too easy. Then you got to make the plank harder. And you got to make the plank harder for rotation. You got to make the plank harder for stabilizing inflection and extension. But it's all about progressive resistance exercise, starting with the foundation of plank and side plank. The other thing, single limb training. Whoa. By far the simplest thing that 99% of athletes and those who weight train lose out on. We will, what a bilateral or both leg squat does? It hides deficits. You want to see what your deficits are? Right. Do a single leg squat with your other foot off the ground. You will see where all your deficits are.
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
Makes perfect sense. So do you put a leg out in front? Like, how do you do it? Or
no,
back?
So in front is what is considered a pistol squat. And pistol squats are good, if you're looking to train just your quads. But functional is what we call the athletic position. So your opposite leg is bent, it's at 45 to 90 degrees, and it's held in slight extension. So it looks almost like a running position. And then you're doing a single leg squat. And it's hard to do, and your glutes are going to be on fire. But what it will do is it will draw out where all your deficits are. And so with our movement assessment, that's one of the things that we do is very intentionally, we go through each test to pre-fatigue for all of the single limb tests, because I want to see how you're going to move when you're tired. Because movement degrades as you fatigue. And with degradation of movement comes a increased risk for injury. It's that simple. Increase your cardiovascular conditioning, increase your core via planks and side planks, progressive resistance exercise. Make sure you're progressing those along.
Like putting a little kid on me while I'm doing planks. How do I increase the plank strength?
Start as you're planking, start some rows with it, so you've got a cable machine in front of you and you're doing some rows, you're doing some leg kicks while maintaining your stability. Side planks, I'll have them raise the opposite leg, raise their opposite arm. I'll have them with resistance against both their arm and their leg at the same time. I mean, you can make those things crazy tough. Like one of the exercises I do for our mixed martial artists is I have this thing called the iron neck. Have you ever heard of that? Mm. So it's a device that you put on your head, and it's got a spindle that goes all the way around it, right? So it can give you 360 degrees of resistance. Then you hook it up to a cable, and then I'll have them in a side plank. So it's pulling their head forward. They have to actively pull their head back while at the same time stabilizing their core. Then I'll have them do a shoulder exercise at the same time. So now they're stabilizing their scapula while stabilizing their core, while stabilizing their pelvis. So it comes about, all of that stability at once. And then, obviously progressing that to rotational stability. Amazing. So a lot of times what I'll do is single leg activities and then start bringing in some rotational stability. So you're lifting a kettlebell, I'm standing on my left leg, reaching across, grabbing a kettlebell on the outside of my left leg and bringing it, or a cable and bringing it across. So I'm having that rotational stability. Fantastic. All while making sure that my knee and my hips are pointing straight ahead.
And can the knee go over the toe, or is that supposed to stay back? I know I'd heard that years ago. Some progression of your knee over your toe is good. Okay. That being said, knees over toes, I don't agree with a lot of the philosophy behind that, but that's for another time. Okay. Fantastic. So that's super good. Man, you've just described such simple exercises, most of which we can do with little or no equipment. It's
Right.
incredible. Even with a
Right.
kettlebell or a
Right.
dumbbell, you're coming across your body and you're doing core and single leg exercise.
Yep. You know, and I'll tell you, Greg. So you said that most of your listeners are about our age, and I don't know how old you are, but I'm 53. I've been weight training for 43 years, and you know, I still love to weight train hard and combine that with my jujitsu. You know, I'm constantly like on that verge of overtraining. You don't want to wear your joints down, and you know, I want to be able to lift my arms still when I'm 65, right? So I don't know how many of your listeners have heard about BFR, blood flow restriction training,
Okay.
but it's definitely something to check out. I teach a certification course for PTs and chiros in blood flow restriction training, and it is a game changer. You know, for the mature athlete, what it allows you to do is train at 30 to 40% of 1 RM, and it feels like you're training at 85% of 1 RM. You get the same physiological response as if you're training at 85% of 1 RM and you're only doing it at 30 to 40% of 1 RM.
Well, can you give us just a brief explanation of how
Yeah.
it works?
Yeah. So you basically, it's a cuff that you put around, there's only 4 locations. Either put it around your femoral arteries or your brachial arteries.
So you're restricting blood flow.
Yeah, you're restricting blood flow, but what you're not doing is you're not restricting blood flow into the muscle. You're restricting. So arteries have muscle, veins do not. So when you turn the cuff on or when you tighten the cuff up, what happens is it collapses the vein first. So blood is going into the muscle, but it's not coming out of the muscle. So blood's going into the muscle, and what happens is the muscle reaches its capacity. And as the muscle is exercising at this low intensity, it's pulling off oxygen, which then depletes the oxygen of the blood that's there and available. The muscle starts to fatigue. So what it ends up doing is recruiting more of the muscle. That's what you get at 85% of 1 RM is you get more motor unit recruitment.
Wow.
And you can hack it by doing this blood flow restriction training. Again, for any of your listeners that are skeptic out there, Google it and Google the research because it is rock solid. So for me, I had a massive knee injury last year, March of last year. A knee injury, a displaced fracture in my hand, and I had what's called a neuropraxia. I lost 85% strength in my right upper extremity, all from a martial arts injury. And that is an injury that typically, especially at 53, takes a year to get back to the mats. And I started BFR day 2 post-operatively, and I was back on the mats at 4 months. 4 months.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And is this something, I hadn't heard of it, is this something that a regular guy can get a hold of and learn about?
You can. You know, there's you know, not to be sales pitchy, but there's a company I teach for called Rock Cuff, and they have an over-the-counter version of what we use for the clinic, and the outcomes on that thing are awesome. It's actually the cuff that I use. I actually teach. So we teach a BFR for jiu-jitsu class. So I teach jiu-jitsu athletes how to use these cuffs to improve their performance. So you can use it with cardiovascular activity. So you can train at 50% VO2 max and with BFR and get the effect of as if you were training at 80% of VO2 max.
Incredible.
I know, right? And it's
so awesome.
People are like, no, I don't believe it. It's a hack. It's, you know, the next fitness, you know, it's the thigh cream of 2022. And what I will tell you is again, I mean, I do a ton of research in this area. And it is rock solid.
Incredible. Okay. Wow, this is so good. These are simple little strategies that we can start. I'm going to start implementing right away.
Yeah.
One question I did have when you said was single limb training, does that also include the arms? Do you do single limb training with the arms, or is it more for the legs?
It's more for the legs because your legs, because so much of human function is single limb performance. Going up a flight of stairs, single limb. Jogging, single limb. Running, single limb. So there's so many things, so many sports in physical activities that are single limb in nature. So there's once you get past walking, there is a time at which you are on single limb. So that's why it's so functional. Now for upper extremity, again, there's a lot of research out there that shows if you improve your core stability, that you actually reduce labral tears and what are called ulnar collateral ligament tears or Tommy John injuries in Major League Baseball players. Again, because the core is your force is generated in your hips and it is transferred across the core to the upper extremity in a baseball player, in a pitcher, right? So it's transferred across the core to the upper extremity. Well, if you have a sloppy core and you generate all this force in your hips and it goes across the core, what happens is a significant amount of that kinetic energy is lost because it's sloppy, right? So then what happens is you have to make up that force loss by throwing harder. So what ends up happening is that then athletes try to throw harder. They use more of their biceps and their cuff, which ends up leading to labral tears in their cuff. It ends up leading to Tommy John procedures in their elbows, simply because their core is weak.
Wow. Well, I'm thinking through in martial arts, especially same thing with throwing a punch. If
Exactly.
my core is just sloppy and
Yep.
weak,
Exactly.
I've got to give it all with my arm,
Yep.
and
Right.
it's going to fail and
Right.
lead to more injuries.
And that's part of the reason, I was talking about the sideline or the side bridge, right? Side plank. It's part of the reason I was talking about, including the upper extremity in that, because, you have core stabilization. Now you have scapular stabilization, upper arm stabilization, and hip stabilization. Having all that stabilization at the same time is really important for kinetic energy transfer to be maximized. Way I always look at it is I'm always trying to maximize force production and kinetic energy transfer. Force attenuation, when you land on your limb, if your limb is falling in, collapsing, then what ends up happening is that force attenuation is bad. And then it goes up each joint to the joint that's solid, which is like your hip or your back. And that's why you end up having a lot of problems.
Incredible. I love this stuff, man. I'm
Yeah.
sitting here geeking out. This is so cool. And it's understanding simple things like this, simple
Yeah.
details, simple biomechanics that changes the way you feel and
Right.
experience life.
Absolutely.
As we're all getting older as well and changing that. I had
Well,
a
and two,
question.
and
Oh,
that's
go ahead.
that's the important part for me, because I call myself a mature athlete. As a mature athlete, it's about still preserving the things that we want to be able to do, but doing it in a way that does not continue to break down our joints. I used to talk to weightlifters that would be like, wait until you get in your 40s and your 50s, you're not gonna be able to lift like that. Well, I still want to be able to lift, maybe not like I used to lift, back in the day, but I still want to maintain and be able to maintain the physicality as I did back then,
Exactly.
and I'm convinced that you can do it. We just have to use the advents of technology and science to be able to do it.
Exactly. Again, optimization.
Yeah.
Man, I love this.
Yeah.
So I had a question about cardio. In all your experience, what would you recommend for the best sources of cardio? You hear people saying maybe sprinting or biking or swimming. Do you have thoughts or experience on that, on long distance running, or what's the
Yeah.
best way to keep up cardiovascular exercise?
It really, to me, you can attack cardio in so many different ways, right? To me, it's really about what is enjoyable for the individual, because you have to do it for a sustained period of time. The studies over and over again tell you that you have to at least do 30 minutes.
Yep.
And so in order to stay on something for 30 minutes, you better enjoy it. So whether that's out running a trail or riding a bike or rolling around on the mats with somebody, for me, I do a lot of cardio with BFR, because what I'm trying to do is, again, mature athlete. lot of these guys that I train martial arts with are at least 20 years younger than me, and I'm trying to keep up with them on the mat. So just so you know, an average rolling session may be 6 to 10 minutes. So you got to be able to sustain energy for 6 to 10 minutes.
which is
So
so
yeah,
hard.
which is it's insane. But part of what I try to do is I try to, for me, I try to do cardio with BFR. Like I'm here in Memphis, and the gym that I'm training at is, they have no air conditioning. It's super hot in there, so I'm trying to acclimate myself
Oh,
to doing sustained movements in hot. So what I do is I'm at my hotel. I go into the hotel gym. I turn the air off. I have a hoodie, and I have a hoodie on the whole time over my head, and I'm working out as hard as I can,
just
trying
sweating
to,
like
trying
crazy.
trying to build my heat tolerance. So that I can still go in there and not get completely gassed.
And will you put the cuffs on?
Yes. So it depends. I mean, it depends on what day I'm doing. If I'm going in like on Fridays, if Friday's there, it's 6 minute rolls for an hour. So you get 6 minute roll, 30-second rest, 6 minute roll, 30-second rest, 6 minute roll, 30-second rest for a whole hour. So I don't do it on that day,
Yeah.
because I typically train before I go to the gym, before I go to jiu-jitsu. So I do all my cardio, my strength training before I go to the gym.
Wow.
And I do that because I want to not have to rely on strength. So I try to fatigue myself out a little bit. So I go in there and I have to do more technique.
Technique. Yep. Amazing. That's an awesome little strategy right there.
Yeah.
That's some big picture thinking.
Yeah.
Because it forces you into the technique instead of just trying to fight your way through it with strength.
Amen.
I love it, brother. Oh man, this has been so good. Okay, anything else we haven't touched? Any last kind of a piece of advice for men, keeping our mind, body, spirit, keeping the whole being just in a good spot? The things you worked with, thousands and thousands of men, you get across the globe, literally. Any last piece of advice or takeaways that you've seen? Like, hey, fellas, this stuff
Yeah.
it works.
I think the thing that we don't talk about enough is the psyche and the mindset. And that is that every single negative thought that you have has an influence on how you are and what you do, and how you respond. And in testing hundreds of firefighters, man, you see some that have just the most upbeat approach, and yes, you see some that don't. And I'm a firm believer in, one, that you have to have that positive mindset.
Yeah.
And two, I think that, and I don't want to get, down a certain rabbit hole, but, there's been this kind of a demasculization of men.
Yep.
And I am proud of the son that I have, the man that I have created. I don't want to say created, but the man that I raised. Because I am seeing a young individual, my son's 17, seeing a young individual who is not afraid to stand up for what he believes, who will stand up for those who cannot stand up for each other. And he's a young man of faith. And he is willing to put in the grit that it takes. He's a wrestler. And he's at a prominent wrestling school here in Middle Tennessee, where they don't have an off season, and that kid works his tail off. And it's so cool to me as a dad to see, like I took him out shooting guns, and I took him to jujitsu, and we roughhoused and we wrestled and we did all the things that our dads did with us, right? And there's been this push to get away from that. And it's like, I love who he is. I love the man that he's become. The best prize in life, I think, and I'm starting to realize that as a dad, like the best prize in life is like seeing the individual that you wanted to be this way, but exceed all of those expectations.
Yeah.
And that is awesome.
It's the biggest reward there is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I love that. Raising those boys and helping them become men. So my son's 18 and my second son is 17. My third son is 11, just not turned
Oh,
12.
wow.
So watching that there,
Yeah.
but also my daughters, right? And especially in this context of manliness, watching them hold a standard for the
Yeah.
boys they're interacting with and saying, hey, nah, like that is so subpar.
Yeah.
I won't even gauge if you're not up here. So
Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more, brother. We gotta lean into this healthy side of manliness.
Yeah.
Of being
Absolutely.
a whole man all the way through.
Absolutely.
Man, I love that. Awesome. Trent, thanks for being here, brother. Thanks for your time.
Greg, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for your example. I want to really emphasize that. Thank you for chasing greatness, like for caring enough, for putting in the hard work to want to do something with excellence, because it makes a difference for everyone around you. And it's an awesome example for all of us, brother. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I mean, I'm just doing what I do. I don't really look at that
But
way, but I
it's a
appreciate
rare
that.
and beautiful thing,
I
man.
appreciate that.
It's
I
super
appreciate
awesome.
that.
Awesome.
Hey,
Thank you, brother.
for any of your listeners that are looking, I did publish a book back in January called How to Build a Badass Firefighter. If you really want to get into, it's very science heavy, you want to get into more information about what this is all about, check it out. You can check it out. It's 350 pages. It's very science heavy, but it goes into all the things around movement and how you change movement, how you change motor programming and exercise programming to improve how you move.
Perfect. And where else? I know you have a website, you got businesses. Like, where else can we
Yeah.
get in contact? Is it possible, even at this point now, to get those assessments? Like, where else can we
Yeah,
take the next step with all this
absolutely.
stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, there's over 450 facilities across the US that offer the EMI. If any of your listeners are interested, they can always follow me on Instagram, BJJPT_ACL guy.
Okay.
And I am connected to, the majority of those EMI users. So if they're in a particular part of the country, I can usually align them with someone in that area that does the assessments.
Fantastic. Love it. Okay. So I'll put those links in the notes there.
Yep.
You can go through and get the book. And the book's on Amazon, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Book's
sir.
on Amazon. Got the connect with you on social. And then, man, I'm gonna do some planks as soon as we're done here.
Awesome.
They're so simple. You just give us some
I
simple
know,
strategies.
right?
So powerful today that we can start doing some things. And I want to get that assessment too, and even for my children, so that we can
Absolutely.
get customized training. So it's practical
Yep.
and functional for each
Absolutely.
individual.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, sir. Appreciate you.
Greg, thank you.
Hey, fellas, hope you really enjoyed that show. I know I did. Got a lot from it. And it's just this big reminder we need to take care of our bodies. That if we're going to show up as men to really be there for our clients and our customers, our patients, and in a workplace, the people we're working with and working for, the people who work for us, we have to have our body in a phenomenal condition. And the same is true if we're going to be there for our wife and be the man that she needs, so we can do everything she needs to do, and we can show up, needs us to do, and we can show up as a lover and a husband and a best friend and a supporter, right? We can be a provider in every way that she needs. Then we've got to be in phenomenal condition. We've got to be in the best health of our life for the rest of our lives. And if you're going to show up for your kids and be there for them to, after a full work day and after, supporting your wife in the morning and at the end of the day and on the weekends, have the energy to wrestle with your kids and roughhouse with your kids and show up for all the things they need. And the more kids, the more energy you need. And we have to, it's just, in my mind, there's no other option, gentlemen. I have to be awake, energized, and alive. I have to be filled with vitality and energy now and for a long, long time. I plan on dancing vigorously at my grandkids' weddings. And so that's easily 30 years out. So it's a great question. Like, hey, are you on track to have great health, energy, vitality, fitness, and to be active and alive 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 50 years from now? I plan on being that way. And we have to lean into that. And this is just another one of the reasons why I built the Be the Man Masterclass and community, so that we could have resources, tools, training, tactics, all the best strategies and the science behind keeping our bodies in a phenomenal condition for the long term. So we have that longevity and energy now and later. And so I built that into, all the experimentation I've done, all the studying I've done. I was actually a personal trainer for years and have been geeking out about this, like I said at the beginning of the episode, reading, searching, studying, researching. I've been doing this for decades and still am constantly doing. I was researching more of it today. I bought some really thick scientific manuals to dig through. Bought those today so I can keep going through this. And this is the kind of stuff I'm researching, talking to the best of the best, practicing, experimenting, and then sharing that with my guys inside the Be the Man Masterclass. And that's just one element. This is one piece of being the man, is making sure that the body we have, we take excellent care of it. So if you are in the Masterclass and Tribe, make sure you're checking in regularly, getting into the courses and the material. I'm always adding more resources. The more I find and study, the more I share. Gentlemen, if you're not yet in the Be the Man Masterclass and Tribe and this community of fantastic men who are committed to being their best selves, then I invite you to consider joining. Jump in there and get a hold of all the resources. There's so many, and taking care of our bodies is just one of many of these elements that we need to be consistently reminded of and addressing and working on to improve and be our very best selves. So, fellas, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Again, if you like the episode, jump on and make sure you subscribe. If you liked it, found some benefit there, go ahead and leave a rating up to 5 stars and a comment. You can share with your friends, your family, your colleagues. You can reach out to me on social, connect with me on there on Instagram. It's greg.denning, or on Facebook or LinkedIn. You can reach out there and ask questions. I can do specific podcast episodes around that or anything else that I can help with. This is part of my life's work to help you be your best self as a family man. So again, thanks for being here. Thanks for being great men. Thanks for caring. Thanks for setting aside precious time to listen. And as always, be the man.